dating while being single, and really we will be discussing more of that. What we've learned, right, from single parents' standpoint, how to do that the right way, what to tell your kids and what not to tell your kids, what to involve with them. But you're right. I think just when you're deciding to leave, I think it's so quick and easy for you to get excited in the fact that you might be free, and those early stages of like, okay, I just left my man or woman, whatever. You jump straight on the dating site. So you go out for a drink and you meet someone. I mean, it's so quick to be destructive in ways that you don't think you're being destructive. So I hear you. Your advice is to consider all of that stuff ahead of time when you're making that choice to leave, to be really careful and not, because I think a lot of us leave in anger, right? A lot of people leave their relationships in an angry place and feel very much justified doing things that will hurt their ex too. I'm not saying you were there, but a lot of people do. But for the children's sake, I hear you. Just consider everything before you think about yourself and what pleases you, because it will impact the kids one way or another.
Absolutely.
So,
and the dynamic and the relationship between you and your spouse or your ex-spouse is extremely important. You know, and the children, they're after a certain age or at a certain age, they witness it all, and they know what's happening, and it can impact them, you know, mentally, emotionally, and so you want to try to keep that relationship as positive as you possibly can.
One of the last questions I wanted to ask you, and it's sort of the one thing that makes me feel sick when I think back to that time when I left my ex, was the time I had to have the conversation with the kids about leaving their dad. And I just want to share this. It's going to be tough and difficult and raw, but kind of want to let everyone know that's listening, like, this was possibly one of the worst days of my life I had to go through, of telling my kids that we're moving out from their dad. How did your kids react?
That is also probably one of the most difficult days, moments, conversations of my life. You know, telling my children we're moving out. We're selling the house, you know, and this is the house that they grew up in. This is their home. This is their neighborhood. When I had that conversation with them, I started the conversation. And again, I was very lucky. I had been talking to a therapist for a while before having this conversation. I started off the conversation by saying, you know that we're always going to be a family. That's never going to change. We're always going to be a family, whether or not Daddy and I are together. Let me start off by saying that we're always going to love you. We're always going to love each other, and we're always going to be a family. So I think before I went into explaining the divorce, I made sure that they understood that us loving each other, us being a family, was never going to change. And for me, I think that conversation, it was very difficult, and the kids were sad. But for me, it might have even been a little bit easier than it is for a lot of parents that are going through divorce.
Did you have the conversation with him, both of you guys? Okay,
and that's why
okay.
We both agreed on it. We both agreed that
do
is
it together.
Exactly.
Even though he didn't want to leave the relationship, but you agreed on.
Well, we didn't agree on having the conversation together. We still had two separate conversations, but we agreed on what we would say to them.
Oh, gotcha.
Right. Okay. So for me, I guess in that regard, it was a little bit easier, because I know there's a lot of parents out there that don't agree on how to handle the situation, right? Or what to say. And then in terms of the house, I remember a therapist saying to me, that's all material stuff. You know, those memories are in your heart. They're in your mind. The home, the furniture, that's all material stuff. It's okay that it goes. You're going to keep those memories. So that really helped. And then when we moved into the new home, you know, we were very intentional with making sure that they had their own space, you know, whatever that might be, a room.
New paint on the wall.
Or they chose the couch, or whatever it might be, you know, that they had to say in, you know, something related to the new space, whatever that space might be. And they shared a room at the time too, so they weren't even getting, you know, individual rooms. So I feel like maybe for you that conversation was a little tougher.
It really was, and I think that it's going to be tough on anybody, because you have to look your kids in the eyes and tell them something that you know is going to completely crush their world. They're not going to understand mom and dad don't love each other the same way, and it's normal, and it's happy. It's going to be happy in the long run. Like, they're never going to understand any of that. All they know is that they were born into a world with two parents. And mind you, I mustn't discount the fact that there are some scenarios out there that are very different. That, I mean, I can't say that. I've heard some kids say they were really happy when they heard their mom told them they were leaving their dad. Maybe their dad beat them or what have you. Don't get me wrong. It's still not the same for every conversation. However, the majority of children, their world will be smashed when you tell them that there's that you guys are separating, right? So in that case, just as a mom, from my point of view perspective, that my whole life has been dedicated to making them happy and feel safe and content, to look them in the eyes and say, I'm going to smash your world into two pieces, was very, very difficult, even though I knew not to bash my ex or anything. But at the time, it was like he had abandoned the relationship. He had chose a different life over. So it was all very right, very needed, very in their best interest and mine. However, they're not going to see that. They're not going to understand that. And they're just going to see, as 6 and 8 year olds, my son was too young to know, their life was being torn apart. And I had to knowingly tell them that message. So it was just, it's like sitting a kid down saying, your dad just died. For me, it was more that way, because the relationship that they knew with their dad was dying, was dead. So it was delivering the same message to me. It was as painful as that. First time I delivered the message, I did it very wrong. I did it in an angry place after a fight with their dad. And I was done. And I went into the room and told the girls we're leaving your dad. And I did it terribly wrong the first time. It started with the fight him and I had gotten into because my daughter had said something and it blew us up into a huge fight. And so she held blame for it for a long time. When I told them we were finally leaving, she for a long time said, it's my fault. She thought it was because of that argument that we had. And she had no clue that it was nothing to do with her at all. That it was all about these 2 years of a long fight with drugs and addiction and lying and deceiving and all that. She had no clue. I kept all that from them, so they had no idea. So my point is, for my situation was different to yours. I did it really badly. But the last time I did it, I obviously had to keep reminding them that it wasn't her fault, it wasn't their fault. And that's, I think, key, is that no matter what your situation is, when you're letting them know that they know it's not their fault and that you love them and that daddy or mommy or whatever loves them too, and that it's nothing to do with them, because kids will innately kind of take blame, I think, a lot of the time. Wonder what they did in it.
Absolutely. And I actually remember that you did shield your children from a lot of what the reality was, right? A lot of what had happened between you two. And I hope I can say this, but there was addiction involved. There was infidelity involved. So you were in a lot of pain and you were rightfully angry. And I think what I give you a lot of credit for is you didn't share a lot of those details with your children. And it is because of that now, at this point, your children have such a wonderful relationship with their dad. You didn't taint their image of their father, you know? And I think that's super important too. You know, the fact that you were able to, you know, once you got through that moment, you know, you were able to move forward in a different way, in a more healthy way for your kiddos.
No, yeah, I agree. I think there's two ways to look at it when in terms of what we talked about earlier with omitting. How much do we tell our children, you know, when it comes to our dramas of our relationships? Because we want to be honest and transparent with our children so they trust us. But we also need to know, as parents, there's only so much a child should know or can handle. It's definitely a real balance and a challenge. I've seen so many parents what I consider is the wrong way of just letting the kids see it all, everything, the fights, the dramas, the ups, the downs, the new boyfriends, and everything. And I've just seen these children look like they're completely lost in a shit show that's like, I know one person that comes to mind, she was raised by a single mom that was like that, and now she doesn't have a relationship with her because she exposed her to so much shit in her life. Actually, my mom's one of those people too. Too much transparency will fuck up your kids, basically. It really will. I mean, really, it really will. However, we have to find out the balance, because they need to know they can trust us and that they see we're humans. And one lady told me once, like, don't let them think this is this pipe dream going on. Like, dad just went to the grocery store and he'll be back soon. You know, they need to know that he's an addict. And the reason he's not home is because he's sick with addiction. They need to know some truths too. Like the disgusting details they do not need to hear that taints, like you said, taints them. At an age where they wouldn't even understand, but definitely slandering them so that so you purposefully are making them hate their dad or something is just also horrific. So no, I really tried hard to do that, to maintain through their eyes what their dad is, which is a good man and a good dad, and he loves them very much. And addiction makes you do things that are against who you are. It makes you do horrible things, and we were victims of that, yes. However, once he's sober, we know he'll be back to who he is, and we'll be here when he's sober, and we'll walk alongside him in sobriety and so on. So yeah, and that was me. That's a whole another again, a podcast on, we could talk about addiction, but for me that was essential for me to understand that disease, so I didn't feel like the ultimate victim. And that although I was very much a victim at that time, I couldn't play the victim because I would poison my children against him and the whole rest of the world. There's a lot of addicts around us,
Yeah.
So
That's beautiful.
It's difficult, though. There's just no easy way to deliver that message to your children. And whether you're leaving a really great guy or you're leaving an addict that's at that time not a great guy, your children still, a lot of the time, are just going to be heartbroken. And it's so hard to look your kids in the eyes and break their hearts like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's hard.
Now, to kind of bring it back full circle a little bit is, two extremes of divorce. You just said it, right? I left a relationship with a wonderful man, and don't get me wrong, he wasn't perfect, but for you it was the complete opposite, where you were leaving an extremely unhealthy relationship. I would say that both situations are just as difficult and just as painful, and so whatever your situation is, it's definitely difficult. But
I think from the outside, just to interrupt, sorry, I know you said before all you people outside were saying stay with him, he's a good man. For me, it was really easy for the outsiders to say leave him, he's a terrible dude, he's on drugs, XYZ, he's cheating, blah blah blah. It was really easy for everybody outside, and it had the easier exit reasoning, but it didn't mean that you and I weren't both feeling the same extreme anxiety of, is this the right thing to do for me and my life and my children? It just doesn't. Like you said, it's only for you to know. And only I know my children and their relationship with their dad. And I only know my husband's struggles and his effort levels. And it's the same with you in your life. And there might be such an easy, clean-cut, ABC, black and white scenario, but just none of it's easy. None of it is. It's not an easy decision to make.
Agreed. Not an easy decision to make, for sure.
Yeah. So that leads me to say that this particular podcast, being that it's all about making the decision to leave, I hope that you guys heard that Esme and I talking about our stories and some of the things that we looked at, and reflecting on when we left and how we handled it. I hope that you guys really take some of this stuff into account, because it is not an easy decision. It's a big one. And we both stand on the same side of, if you can make it work for your children, make it work, right? Try. Do everything in your power. Go to counseling. We did counseling too for a year, for a long time before, 6 years before I left. We had a lot of stuff, and we went counseling every week for a year. And that was the one reason I did stay with him for so long, is we were both working really hard on the relationship. And I think, like you said, if two people are fully invested in trying to overcome certain things and work on it, it's going to be manageable and doable. People have done it and overcome hurts and things. And counselors are a great resource. I have one now. I always will. I mean, not just for trouble couples, it's for everything and everyone. But do consider not leaving your other person, or you just consider a lot if you choose to leave and do the single life on your own with kids, because it's not easy. It's great as well in many ways. It's rewarding, it's beautiful, and I love my life today. And obviously this was God's plan for my life, and that's why I'm here right now. But I would still, if I could rewind the clock, I don't know what I would do differently overall. I would just not have painted a picture where I've ended up single, raising 3 kids. I just wouldn't. I wouldn't want that for any child, to have a single mom life. So, but it is beautiful, and you can survive it and thrive in this life. And that's why we're here, because I love my life today and I love my single mom friends. But yeah, what do you have to say about that in closing?
I would agree. I feel like the ultimate goal is that, when you decide to leave your marriage, that you do focus on being happy and surviving and thriving,
Yeah.
And, I'll say what I said earlier, but at the end of the day, it's your decision to make, nobody else's. So you do whatever's in your mind and in your heart. And that's what I would say about that.
Hey, sometimes it's all about figuring out how to be single in your relationship. Not being, having sex outside the relationship or what have you, but learning how to have fun and survive and thrive as a single mom and still stay with that person the kid's other parent. I mean, sometimes that's the solutions. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Esme, I'm so glad you came. Thank you so much for being here today.
Well, thank you. It was an honor. I appreciate you inviting me to your first.
My very first episode. And you'll be on others too. This is not the one and only that you'll be here. So thank you everybody for listening. And I hope you enjoyed today's podcast. And we will speak to you on the next one. I hope you'll all join me for the next